parents demanded I sell my house to pay off my sister's $160,000 debt after they cut me out 5 years ago. I never thought I'd see the day when my parents would show up at my door, demanding anything from me. My name is Scarlett, I'm 29, and I've spent the last 5 years building a life completely on my own after my parents disowned me at 24. They said I wasn't following the family's plan, that I was selfish, and that I was no longer their daughter. It broke me at first, but eventually, it lit a fire inside me to prove I could survive without their approval. My younger sister, Camila, was the golden child. She could do no wrong in their eyes, even when she dropped out of college twice, spent money like it was water, or ignored basic responsibilities. Meanwhile, I was the problem, the scapegoat, the one who couldn't get her life together. I worked 2 jobs, lived in tiny apartments, and saved every penny I could. Every promotion, every raise, every small step forward was mine because I earned it alone. Finally, after years of struggling, I bought my own home. A real home, not a rental, not a hand-me-down. It was more than just a roof over my head. It was proof that I had made it on my own. I felt proud, free, and for the first time in years, like I belonged somewhere. That house represented my independence, my hard work, and my refusal to be defined by the way my family treated me. Then one afternoon, everything I had built came under threat. My parents appeared at my doorstep, smiling like nothing had ever happened, and dropped the bombshell. Camila had racked up $160,000 in debt, and they expected me to sell my house to pay it off. I froze. My first instinct was disbelief. After 5 years of silence, after being treated like I didn't exist, they were back only because they wanted money from me. My heart raced, a mix of anger and betrayal. Camila stood beside them, smirking slightly, as if I owed her something for simply existing. My mind flashed back to all the times they told me I wasn't good enough, all the times I struggled to survive while she coasted through life on their praise. The sheer audacity of their demand made my blood boil. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this house, this life I built, was mine. No one could take it from me without a fight. I wasn't just Scarlett, the disowned daughter, anymore. I was Scarlett, the woman who survived, the woman who succeeded, and the woman who would not be used. And that's when I realized they didn't know the fight they had just started. I wasn't just going to say no. I was going to make sure the truth about everything came out. This was just the beginning. A few years back, my life took a turn I never expected. It all started when my parents asked me to co-sign Camila's student loan. I knew it was a huge risk. Camila had always been reckless with money, dropping out of college twice and spending without thinking about the consequence. I tried to explain that I couldn't take on that kind of debt for her, that I had my own life to build, but they didn't want to hear it. Instead of understanding, my parents blew up at me. They told me I was selfish, ungrateful, and that I was no longer their daughter. I couldn't believe it. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally were cutting me out because I had the sense to protect my own future. And just like that, I was gone from their world, as if I had never existed. At first, I felt lost. I had no family to lean on, no safety net, and it was terrifying. But I also realized something important. I had myself, and I had the ability to create the life I wanted. I moved out of the house, found a small apartment, and started working 2 jobs. Every day was exhausting, but every day I was building something real for myself. I learned to be independent, to budget carefully, and to fight for every small victory. Camila, on the other hand, continued down the path I had tried to avoid. She ran up debts, dropped out again, and somehow kept getting praised by my parents while I struggled in silence. I watched her life from afar and felt a mix of frustration and sadness, knowing my parents refused to see the truth. She wasn't responsible, and I had been blamed for being practical and careful. For 5 years, I didn't contact them. I focused entirely on myself, my career, my finances, my peace of mind. I didn't want to argue, and I didn't want to be dragged back into a cycle of disappointment and guilt. I had built boundaries around my life, and they were strong. I was determined not to let their opinions or demands control me anymore. Then, suddenly, after half a decade of silence, they showed up at my door. It felt surreal, like time had skipped over the years I had spent surviving on my own. They didn't come to apologize or even check in. They came with a demand, expecting me to pay for the mess my sister had created. It was shocking and angering, but not entirely surprising. After all, this was the same family that had abandoned me the moment I refused to risk everything for Camila. Standing there, listening to them, I realized how much I had grown in those 5 years. I wasn't the scared, disowned daughter they had pushed away. I was someone who had built a life from nothing, someone who had proven to herself that independence wasn't just possible, it was worth fighting for. And in that moment, I knew I wouldn't let them take that away from me. I still remember the day they told me. My parents stood in my living room, acting as if nothing had ever happened, and then dropped the bombshell. Camila had racked up $160,000 in debt. My stomach twisted. I could hardly process what I was hearing. Credit cards maxed out, failed business ventures she'd started and abandoned, even gambling losses. They expected me to believe that somehow this was my problem. Then they hit me with the real shocker. They framed it as my duty to fix everything. My parents looked at me with wide, serious eyes and told me I had to sell my house and hand over the money to bail Camila out. I blinked. My house. The place I had fought tooth and nail to own, the place that represented every ounce of struggle and sacrifice I had endured, was suddenly on the table as collateral for my sister's irresponsibility. I felt my blood boil. How dare they? How dare they cut me off for years, make me feel like I didn't exist, and now suddenly act like I owed them everything. I had rebuilt my life from scratch, worked endless hours, sacrificed nights out and weekends to save every penny, and now I was supposed to throw it all away because Camila couldn't manage her own life? As I stood there, frozen in disbelief, they tried to push me further. "You're heartless," my mother said softly, with that tone she always used to make me feel guilty. "How can you abandon your own sister when she needs you the most?" My father nodded, looking disappointed, as if I was some cruel stranger instead of their daughter. Camila sat beside them, her expression smug, like this was the perfect plan. She didn't have to lift a finger. I was supposed to save her from the consequences of her own choices. Every ounce of frustration I had bottled up over the years, the endless guilt trips, the favoritism, the accusations that I was selfish, came rushing back. I wanted to shout, to tell them that they were the ones who abandoned me, that Camila had always been reckless while I built a real life. But more than that, I felt something else: shock. How could they be so bold, so blind to everything they had done? They had treated me like a stranger, denied me for years, and now they had the audacity to present this as my responsibility? And the guilt trip didn't stop. They reminded me again and again that if I didn't help, I would be cruel and heartless. They tried to frame my refusal as some moral failure, a betrayal of family duty, ignoring the years of pain and struggle I had endured. It was infuriating, humiliating, and deeply unfair. In that moment, I realized just how twisted this whole situation was. They weren't asking for help. They were demanding it, trying to manipulate me into paying for someone else's mistakes. And the more they guilt-tripped me, the more determined I became. I wasn't going to let them use me. My house, my life, and my hard-earned independence were not theirs to take. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hand. "No," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not selling my house. I'm not giving you or Camila a single penny." For a moment, they looked stunned, like I'd just said something impossible. Then the storm hit. My parents' faces twisted with anger. My mother's voice cracked with fury. "Ungrateful, cold, selfish. How can you do this to your own family?" My father's eyes flashed with disbelief, as if I had betrayed some unspoken rule I didn't even know existed. Camila, of course, jumped right in, her smirk so infuriating it made my skin crawl. "Scarlett, you always had it easier. You had your career, your life sorted while I struggled. You owe me this," she said, tilting her head as if she were explaining a simple math problem. The entitlement in her voice was nauseating. I couldn't help but laugh, bitter and sharp. "Oh, you," I said, my laughter trembling with anger. "You really have no idea, do you? I was kicked out, left to survive on my own while you were being spoiled and protected at every turn. I had to work 2 jobs just to make rent, eat, and survive. And now you expect me to give you everything I've built? Are you serious?" My words seemed to hang in the room, heavy and undeniable. For a few seconds, everyone froze, maybe realizing that my anger wasn't just a phase, it was justified. But Camila, of course, didn't care. She kept her smug expression, probably expecting my voice to crack, my resolve to crumble. It didn't. "I built this house," I continued, my voice steadier now, sharper. "I fought for every penny, every nail, every inch of this place. It's mine. You had years to manage your own life, Camila, and you failed. I didn't fail. And I'm not going to let you or anyone else take what I worked so hard for." My parents looked like they might scream, their hands trembling, their faces red with anger and shock. I wasn't intimidated by their theatrics anymore. I had faced worse in my life than a temper tantrum from the people who once claimed they loved me. Finally, I gestured toward the door. "Leave. Now. I don't want to hear another word about this. Get out of my house." My words were cold, final, and filled with the authority that only years of struggle and independence can give someone. There was a tense pause. Then slowly, reluctantly, they started moving toward the door. Camila shot me one last glare, full of venom and entitlement, but I didn't flinch. I watched them leave my home, my sanctuary, and for the first time, a strange wave of satisfaction and relief washed over me. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, letting out a shaky breath. They had tried to control me, manipulate me, guilt me, but it hadn't worked. Not this time. I was standing my ground, and for the first time in a long time, I felt untouchable. My house was mine, my life was mine, and no one could take that away. The next few days were brutal. I thought cutting my parents off would give me peace, but instead, it felt like a new kind of war had begun. Word spread fast. Somehow, my parents had spun the story to every relative they could reach, painting me as the cruel daughter who abandoned her family. I started receiving calls and texts from aunts, uncles, and even cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Every message was the same. Why wasn't I helping Camila? How could I be so heartless? I read one message from an uncle, his words sharp with judgment. "Scarlett, you always think you're too good for the family. Now Camila needs you, and you just turn your back." Another cousin texted, calling me selfish and ungrateful, as if I had done something unforgivable by refusing to bail out someone else's irresponsibility. It was suffocating, and for a moment, I wondered if I should cave just to make the calls stop. But even as I felt torn, I reminded myself of the truth. I had been cut out of this family years ago. I had been disowned and told I was no longer their daughter for protecting my own future. I had built everything with my own hands. Every dollar in my account, every brick in my house, every hour of sleep lost to work and stress, it was all mine. No guilt trip, no smear campaign could change that. Still, the messages stung. It hurt to see family I loved unquestioningly believe the lies my parents were feeding them. It felt like I was invisible, not seen as a human who had sacrificed, struggled, and survived, but only as a wallet to solve Camila's problem. My chest ached with a mixture of anger, frustration, and sadness. Meanwhile, Camila went on social media like nothing had changed. She posted pictures of herself with sad captions about being abandoned and betrayed by the sister who should have cared. Every post seemed carefully designed to make me look like the villain. Some distant relatives commented in sympathy, while others shared her posts, spreading the narrative further. It was exhausting watching the story twist and grow without my side being heard. Yet, as much as it hurt, I refused to react in the way they expected. I didn't post angrily or try to argue online. I didn't lower myself to become part of their spectacle. I stood my ground, quietly confident that the truth couldn't be hidden forever. I reminded myself that my life, my work, and my home were real. Theirs was built on entitlement, lies, and manipulation. By the end of the week, I felt a strange mix of strength and sadness. I was standing alone against everyone who had once been my support system. I was being vilified by the people I had once trusted, and it hurt deeply. But I also knew that my refusal to give in wasn't cruelty. It was survival. And while they painted me as heartless, I understood that sometimes doing what's right for yourself doesn't look right to others. I closed my phone and sat quietly in my living room, thinking about the battle ahead. It wasn't just about Camila anymore. It was about protecting myself and the life I had fought so hard to build. The real challenge was about to begin. After the whirlwind of guilt trips, calls, and messages, I realized I couldn't just sit back and take it anymore. Saying no once felt good, but it wasn't enough. They had tried to paint me as the villain, and if I didn't do something, the lie would stick. I decided then and there, I wouldn't just refuse, they would see the truth, and I would make it undeniable. I started by digging through everything I could find on Camila's spending habits. Old bank statements, receipts, credit card records, even emails about failed business ventures. Every detail counted. I wanted to show exactly how she had accumulated that $160,000 in debt. There were credit cards maxed out for luxury clothes, beauty treatments, and dining out she could never afford. I found documents about a boutique she tried to start but never launched, leaving debts for rent, inventory, and suppliers unpaid. Then there were the gambling losses, receipts, bank withdrawals, and messages confirming she had been betting online for months. As I gathered evidence, memories of past betrayals came rushing back. I remembered the time she stole my car to go on a weekend trip, leaving me stranded at work and furious. I recalled how she had maxed out a joint account we shared years ago, ignoring my warnings and letting the balance plunge into the negatives. Every incident added to the pattern, a clear history of recklessness and manipulation that my parents had never wanted to see. I began organizing everything meticulously. Receipts went into labeled folders, emails were sorted by date and type, and every bank statement was highlighted to show the truth. I made spreadsheets to track unpaid bills, gambling losses, and her spending on luxury items. I didn't want this to be a messy confrontation or a shouting match. This had to be clean, factual, and undeniable. While documenting, I realized something crucial. My revenge didn't need to be loud or dramatic. It didn't require social media posts or public shaming. This wasn't about embarrassment. It was about truth and accountability. I needed something irrefutable, something that would leave no room for lies or spin. Every paper, every screenshot, every figure would speak for itself. I also planned how to present it carefully. Timing, setting, and calm delivery would matter more than anger. I wanted my parents and Camila to see clearly that their version of events was false. I wanted them to understand that for years, I had been the responsible one, the one who built a life, while Camila had relied on manipulation and their favoritism. By the time I finished, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and focus. I had turned my anger and frustration into something constructive, a plan that didn't just protect me, but also exposed the truth. I wasn't just standing up for myself anymore. I was reclaiming my story piece by piece, with facts that could not be ignored. Finally, I leaned back in my chair, looking at the stack of evidence. I smiled faintly, knowing that when the time came, my silence would be more powerful than anything they could throw at me. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice, clear and undeniable. A week later, I got the call. My parents had arranged a family meeting at Aunt Linda's house, claiming it was to resolve the situation with Camila's debt. I already knew what it meant, a room full of relatives, all ready to guilt me into handing over my hard-earned money. I debated skipping it, but part of me wanted them to see the truth face to face. When I arrived, the room was buzzing with whispered conversations. Aunts, uncles, cousins. I recognized some faces from childhood and some I hadn't seen in years. Camila was already there, her eyes wide and filled with what she wanted everyone to believe was fear and desperation. My parents smiled, the kind of fake smiles that made my skin crawl, and gestured for me to sit. The meeting began almost immediately with my parents laying out their case. They spoke in dramatic tones, reminding everyone of Camila's debt and painting me as heartless for refusing to help. Scarlett's house is just bricks, my mother said, her voice sharp, but Camila's future is at stake. My father nodded in agreement, adding, "We can't understand how anyone could be so cold to their own sister." One by one, relatives chimed in, asking why I wasn't willing to step up, sharing their disappointment, and telling me I needed to do the right thing. The pressure was suffocating. Every glance I got from my family felt like a challenge, like they were waiting for me to crumble under the weight of their judgment. Then Camila took center stage. She started to cry, not the natural kind of tears, but the calculated type designed to pull on hearts. "I've done nothing wrong," she sniffled, "and now my only sister abandons me when I need her the most. I don't understand why she's being so cruel." The words felt like knives, aimed at guilt I had no intention of accepting. I listened quietly, letting everyone speak. I didn't interrupt, even when my parents repeated their accusations, or when some cousins muttered under their breath about how Scarlett always thinks she's better than us. It was tempting to yell, to defend myself immediately, but I knew timing mattered. I needed everyone to say everything, to fully commit to their assumptions, so that when I revealed the truth, it would hit harder. Once the room had emptied itself of judgment, whispers, and self-righteous lectures, I finally spoke. My voice was calm but firm. "I've listened to everything you've said, and I understand you all believe I'm cruel. But what you don't know is the reality of Camila's actions and the truth about my life. I wasn't absent because I was selfish. I was absent because I was forced to survive on my own after being cut out by the very people who now criticize me. And I've been documenting everything about Camila's choices, so you can see the facts for yourselves." I could feel the room go quiet. All the whispers stopped, and all eyes turned to me. For the first time, I held everyone's attention completely, and I knew the moment to expose the truth had finally come. I took a deep breath and opened the folder I had brought with me. The room was tense, everyone waiting for me to speak, probably expecting a quick apology or surrender. But I had prepared for this moment for days, and I wasn't about to falter now. Slowly, I began spreading the documents across the table. "Let's go over the facts," I said, my voice steady. "These are receipts from Camila's credit cards. Luxury clothes, designer bags, expensive dinners. She spent thousands she didn't have, and now she wants someone else to pay for it." I pointed to another stack of papers. "Here are bank statements showing multiple gambling withdrawals over the last year and emails about her boutique that never existed, leaving suppliers unpaid and contracts broken. This is her pattern, and it's been ongoing for years." The room went silent. I could feel the tension shift. The aunts and uncles who had been judging me only minutes ago now leaned in, whispering nervously to each other. My parents' faces twisted, shock, disbelief, and finally a flicker of fear. Camila's smugness faltered, replaced by a nervous edge. I had their attention, and it was all factual, all undeniable. I continued, keeping my tone calm but firm. I wasn't absent because I didn't care. I was cut out by my own parents when I refused to co-sign Camila's loan. I had to survive on my own. I worked 2 jobs, saved every penny, and built this life from scratch. And now, after years of disownment, they return, not to reconnect, not to apologize, but to demand I pay for mistakes I didn't create. I let that sink in. The whispers grew louder, this time filled with disbelief and confusion. Some relatives stared at my parents, some at Camila, and some at me, processing the evidence I had laid out. "I owe nothing to people who abandoned me," I said, my voice rising slightly, not in anger but in authority. "I owe nothing to someone who consistently made poor choices while expecting others to fix them. I am not heartless. I am honest, and I am done being used as a safety net for Camila's irresponsibility." Camila opened her mouth, probably to protest, but I ignored her. The facts spoke for themselves. No amount of crying, no sob story, no manipulation could erase the evidence I had gathered. Each receipt, each statement, each email painted a picture of a life built on recklessness and entitlement, and the family could no longer ignore it. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of my relatives one by one. I saw hesitation, confusion, and finally, a few nods of understanding. My parents tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand. This wasn't about argument, it was about truth. As I gathered my folders and stood, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I had spoken, I had shown the facts, and the room could no longer side blindly with lies. I wasn't the villain here. I was the one who had survived, who had built something real, and who refused to let manipulation dictate my life. Finally, the scales of truth had been laid bare, and I was free. The room was silent for a few moments after I finished laying out the evidence. Then slowly murmurs started spreading, relatives leaning toward each other, whispering and glancing at Camila. The shock on their faces was unmistakable. For the first time, the story wasn't just one-sided. They were seeing her actions for what they really were: reckless, manipulative, and unfair. Aunt Linda, who had been quietly observing the whole time, finally spoke up. "Scarlett, I had no idea. I knew Camila had her issues, but I didn't know it was this bad. You've been treated horribly." A few others nodded, agreeing, and even some cousins who had been sending me judgmental messages started speaking in my defense. The tide was turning, and it was a relief I didn't even know I needed. My parents, however, were furious. My mother's face had turned red, and my father's jaw was tight. "Heartless," they shouted in unison. "You're cruel to your own family. How can you stand there and treat Camila like this?" Their anger was loud, but their words had lost their power. I had facts, I had the truth, and I had finally shown it. Their accusations felt hollow now, almost desperate. Camila, however, had had enough, her face twisted with fury and humiliation. "You think this makes you better than me?" she hissed, her voice sharp and venomous. "You're nothing but a selfish, cruel sister. I hope you rot in that house all alone." And with that, she stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. I could hear her cursing as she went, but I didn't flinch. I felt a strange mix of relief and empowerment. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one being bullied or guilt-tripped. I wasn't the one being blamed for someone else's mistakes. I stood in that living room with my head held high, feeling an unfamiliar but welcome sense of freedom. Every moment of doubt and struggle I had faced while building my life alone suddenly felt worth it. After the chaos settled, I pulled out my phone. Without hesitation, I blocked my parents' numbers. No more calls, no more guilt trips, no more manipulation. I didn't need them in my life anymore. I had been disowned once, and now I was choosing to completely remove their toxicity from my world. Their anger and accusations could no longer touch me. Walking out of Aunt Linda's house, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of their judgment, their favoritism, and their manipulation was gone. Camila's lies had been exposed, my parents' hypocrisy revealed, and I was finally free to live my life without fear or expectation. For the first time, I felt the satisfaction of standing up for myself and knowing I had done the right thing. I realized then that freedom didn't always come from reconciliation or forgiveness. It could come from leaving behind people who never deserved your loyalty. I had taken control, faced the confrontation, and now I could finally breathe. The past 5 years of struggle had led to this moment, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and completely untouchable by the toxicity that once haunted me. Back at my home, I sank into the familiar comfort of my own space, letting the quiet wrap around me. My house wasn't just a building, it was every late night, every sacrifice, every ounce of energy I had poured into creating a life that was truly mine. The walls held my memories, my victories, and even my scars from the years of struggle. Sitting there, I finally let myself breathe, knowing I had fought for something real, something no one could take away. I thought about my family, or rather, what I had once called family. For years, I had hoped they would change, that they would see reason and treat me with fairness. But the truth was clear now. Their choices and behaviors were theirs alone, and I didn't have to carry the weight of their mistakes anymore. Camila would continue making poor decisions without me bailing her out, and my parents would keep twisting reality to protect her. The debt, the chaos, the drama, they were natural consequences of their actions, and I had no obligation to rescue them. Instead, I began thinking about the people I wanted in my life, the ones who truly cared, who valued me for who I am rather than what I could give them. I promised myself that my chosen family, friends, colleagues, and loved ones who respected my boundaries would be the people I invested my time and energy in. They were the people who celebrated my wins without judgment, who offered support without expectation, and who lifted me up instead of tearing me down. For the first time in a long time, I felt excited about cultivating relationships that were healthy and mutual. The house felt warmer than ever. Every corner reminded me of battles fought and victories won. I realized that my revenge didn't need to be loud or dramatic. I hadn't had to embarrass anyone publicly or lash out with anger. My revenge had been simple yet powerful, standing tall with the truth. I had shown my family, without any embellishment, exactly who was responsible for the mess they tried to blame me for. I hadn't needed their approval, their money, or their false affection. I had needed only myself, and that had been enough. I poured a cup of coffee and looked out the window at the garden I had tended on my own. Life was moving forward, quietly and steadily. I could feel the peace settling in, peace I hadn't known in years. I no longer carried the weight of guilt or the need to prove myself to people who never truly valued me. I had control of my life, my space, and my choices, and that was liberating. For the first time in a long time, I smiled without hesitation. My story, my house, and my life were my own. My revenge had been simple, clean, and undeniable. I had refused to be used, refused to be manipulated, and refused to let anyone define my worth. Standing in my living room, I understood that I never needed them to feel complete. I had survived, I had thrived, and my new beginning was just beginning. Do you think Scarlett made the right choice by cutting ties with her family and standing up for herself? Or should she have tried to mend things despite everything? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to hear your opinion. And if you love stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new one.